Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, venture capitalist, securities analyst, and advisor, Morty Davis is a Wall Street legend. In addition, Mr. Davis is an outstanding economist and highly articulate, incisive, and very entertaining political analyst and strategist. He's Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through The Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical economic and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on the news making the headlines is Len Carter. Len is an investment banker, business consultant, and private investor. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Carter.
Come back to the Morty Davis show. My favorite people in the whole world, especially my favorite people on the internet who make such a wonderful contribution every single week to this show every Wednesday, 6:30 to 7:30. The show and the podcast that follows or is part of the show, and to which you all make such major contributions as participants, since you've sent me your comments and your interesting and wise insights and your wisdom to go along and add it to mine, and even upgrading my wisdom, because your criticisms help me rethink a lot of my positions, even especially when I find that your criticism may be a bit harsh and my initial reaction is a negative one. I stop and think for a minute and I say, let me see why this listener or this participant, this cohort, is taking this position, because you've demonstrated over time you're anything but silly or just going by the seat of your belt. It's well thought out. So it helps me rethink my positions and broaden my views, and therefore, in the process, makes me wiser. So I can't thank you enough for being such active participants, being cohorts in the development of this weekly show and its podcast. So now, without further ado, let's get on with this week's show. And as always, I apologize up front, because by its nature, since this podcast on the Morty Davis show is made up of the week's news as determined by the leaders of our networks, are the people that prepare our viewership, knowing that these are the kind of issues and talks that compel subscribers to pay to listen to these shows. So by their nature, because bad news is the only news that's headline news. Good news is never making the front cover of the New York Times or the front cover of the Washington Post or the New York Post or your favorite news magazine. It's just not dramatic enough.
So Les, before we start,
I'm pleased to announce, I'm excited to announce that we once again I busted his arm getting him to come because he's paid, his employer has paid thousands of dollars, by hundreds of thousands of dollars, by leading corporations and states and countries to give his advice, his insights, and so forth. So I'm pleased to have him with me today.
thank you, Morty.
Once again, one of the old-time geniuses, Len Carter.
So
Len, thank you so much.
Thank you, Morty. You know, before the show,
I hope your arm gets better before the next show.
I'll work on it. Before the show, you mentioned you are always taken by a phrase that presidents use. The first time I heard it was by President Reagan, and reused and often emphasized by other politicians who support big defense budgets and big military actions, with one now being Iran, and President Trump's use of the phrase "peace through strength."
Right.
So, give me your thoughts on peace through
Trump
strength.
uses that all the time.
Yeah, it started by Ronald Reagan, or maybe even before Ronald Reagan, but certainly
And that's
used greatly by him.
That's the major argument for us spending not billions but trillions of dollars for defense spending.
Yep.
We are the strongest nation, arms-wise and every other way, military, of any country in the world and any country in the history of the world. And it turns out, even though we're the strongest and nobody comes near us, and we have more strength, that if that were true, we wouldn't always be in constant wars and constant military conflicts. We spend the most of any nation by far in the world, many times what all the others put together spend, and of any country in the history of the human race. And notwithstanding that, we're always in some conflict with other nations. If that were true, peace through strength, we would have none of that. That's the biggest propaganda lie ever portrayed or stated in a motto that gets us or anybody else to spend not billions, but literally trillions of dollars to get this strength, so we have peace, and we don't have peace. It's outright propaganda, outright base lies.
So do you think that there's any truth to deterrence? Can you have any form of deterrence as a way to ward off or deter
Yes.
any kinds of conflict?
But only if you use that strength militarily. But the main part of the strength is in the armaments and the threat of using them. But we constantly say we won't send troops, or we won't send, what do they call it?
Boots on the ground.
Troops on the ground, that's it. So since everybody knows peace through strength, but we won't ever use our real strength, which is the peace on the ground. After all, here we're put in such a bad state by the closing of the Hormuz passageway because it's being blocked by Iran and others, and it's feasible through strength to overcome that. And we can't do it because everybody knows we constantly announce that we won't send troops on the ground. And if we won't send troops on the ground, nobody worries about peace through strength.
So it's sort of the old adage, put your money where your mouth is.
That's it.
And if you don't, then talk is cheap.
Right.
And you can talk all you want about strength, but if you don't use your strength in a way that you said you were going to use it, right? It's one thing to not say it, but if you do say it and then don't use it, you do sort of defeat your own.
Not only that, a minute after they say it, they contradict it by saying, but we won't send troops on the ground because that's too politically alienating and the country is not for it. We don't want to lose troops. So if you can't use the strength, peace through strength doesn't work. It's a big lie. It's a big propaganda. It's a motto that has not even 1% validity, and we should stop using it unless we're prepared to follow it with using the strength to carry out our objectives.
I mean, I guess the irony is, unlike a lot of enemies who talk big and then don't act big, they can get away with it because they never have to put their money where their mouth is and never have to actually make good on a threat.
Yeah, they can't even execute.
Right. So they can keep, brandishing as much as they want.
Threatening.
And nothing happens. And the irony is the U.S. has the capability, has the power, has the strength,
right,
but won't follow through on using it because it's not as popular across the,
if that motto were true,
across the government and across the population.
Leonard, if that motto were true, we'd have peace all the time because we're the strongest nation in the history of the human race by far. And we don't spend thousands or tens of thousands. We spend trillions to establish that strength. And if we actually used it, it probably would work.
Right.
But we announced right afterwards that even though we're the strongest, we won't use...
Can you imagine if the Iranians had the power the U.S. has, or the Germans had the power that the U.S. has,
Right.
or the Japanese had the power that the U.S. have? Do you think that they would not use it?
Not only that.
We'd all be speaking German now.
Not only that. The evidence is every day we insist, because we know if Iran got an atom bomb, they said they'd wipe out Israel. And that's the mild Satan, or the small Satan. The United States is the major Satan, or the horrible Satan. So if it goes for Israel, it goes, and that's why. But we have the atom bomb. We could stop everybody. We don't use it, and they know we won't use it. but we insist that the Iranians can't get it because we know they would use it. So unless we're prepared to use that strength that you keep it in, as long as you keep it locked in, up and not used, you might as well not have it.
And what about economic strength? I mean, here's an interesting thing. The Senate just recently overwhelmingly passed new sanctions, legislation to target Russia and Iran. They could allow President Trump to impose tariffs up to 100% on countries that continue buying large amounts of Russian energy. So do you think threatening China, India, and even other U.S. allies with big tariffs would create enough pressure on, enemies like Russia to end the Ukraine war? Or do you think it would just, further raise prices while giving the U.S. president more tariff powers?
Well, the evidence Russia and China and everybody, including Iran, have is that the United States is not prepared, even though they talk big about doing everything striptease through strength. They're not prepared to use that strength in a way that's effective. In other words,
including economic strength. So would you use economic strength as well? I mean, would you impose tariffs? Would you say to the world, anyone who does business with Russia is going to not do business with us? That's strong economic
It's much
power.
simpler. The Strait of Hormuz is one that destroys all of the economic powers of the West and much of the rest of the world. And nobody's prepared to put troops on the ground to stop that. And that's the only way to stop it. And that's critical. I mean, here we got the strongest everything. We spend not thousands or billions, but trillions to establish this position. And then when there's a use that would make it effective, we don't want to. We announced we won't send troops on the ground.
One of the hopes in the beginning of the Iran war was that the population would rise up and try to overthrow its tyrannical government, oppressive government, and the idea behind the Trump blockade on Iranian ports, which has, I think, now been reinstituted. One of the ideas behind that was to put more and more economic pressure and pain on the Iranian country, the people, so that the people at some point, the masses, rise up. I mean, the corrupt, elite government and IRGC and those people have plenty of money because they take it all from the, oil imports, exports. But the masses aren't doing that great. They're hurting because the economy's in ruins in Iran. So do you think that there's a possible strategy over time? It's a long game. It's playing the long game to put enough pressure that the country, implodes, and that, look, at the end of the day, there's 90 million people in Iran, I think, and how many? That's a lot of people compared to the few 100,000 elites that run and military that run the government. So, 90 million people can definitely overwhelm a few 100,000 if they wanted to.
Well, we overwhelmed their Navy, their Army, their leaders and everything, and we can't get anything done.
But do you think over time, by, say, blocking their ports, if you block the ports long enough, do you think that it'll create such internal turmoil in Iran that people will revolt?
Sadly,
Or
you
never?
can't do it selectively, because in the process, the one that punishes the worst are the constructive companies in the world that produce and ship out product. And they're the ones that are being penalized enormously. The cost of delivering stuff and getting it safely delivered has evaporated, notwithstanding Trump's repeated statement that we've wiped out their army, their navy, their leadership. Any punishment we do seems to backfire more on our allies and our country and our military than it does on the Iranians. Unless we make the real commitment, which is we're prepared to lose troops on the ground to accomplish our goal, then they would take us seriously. But the minute they announce something threatening or big, they instantly say, but we're not going to use, that's a lot of it is domestically driven, politically driven. But by saying that right away, peace through strength, they're wasting $1 trillion. Because they can't, the $1 trillion that they spend is not being used in a way that lets them carry out what it would take to implement any real changes.
So you don't think there's that as bad as the conditions are for the population, that even without sending in troops, that there would be a situation where the internal population of the country uprises?
I don't believe that.
You think they'll just suffer?
I think the United States has way more power than the internal people.
Yep.
And the internal people are still held back by their whoever's still part of the regime, and especially the IMG, what is it called?
IRGC.
IOGC.
Yeah,
there's a big army ready to
and that's just the elite army.
subdue,
and there's even a bigger army.
Subdue them, yeah.
That's always the key in dictatorships, is to control them.
Very depressing that you can spend $1 million on what it takes to do it, and we don't use any of that to carry out what needs to be done with that.
So, I mean, on that depressing note, I see we're about out of time. But
it's called life.
Yep, it's called life, and it's called the end of the show. But
all right, God bless you.
Life goes on, and the shows go on. So we'll be back.
God bless you all. I love you. Have a wonderful week. Everything good should happen to you and all your loved ones. Each day should be better than the day before, unto eternity. Good luck. I love you. See you next week, 6:37. Bye.